Welcome to the Ford and General Motors Sustainability and Risk Report slideshow. It's by Jeffrey Morse. It's for the Social Responsibility and Risk class from Brandman University. Here's the bottom line for sustainability. The world's population continues to grow, and the non-renewable resources that once were the foundation of industry can no longer support the advancing populations. Also, an outcry for human rights, safety, and fair wage is promoting business to find innovative ways to care for people and still make a profit. Climate changes, ocean die-offs, and soil, water contamination and reclamation have produced a necessity for care for the planet. In the world, there is such social progress that even those countries that were once considered third world are now moving more into industrialization. What is sustainability? Maintaining a state of a dynamic balance of a system with its major elements interacting with each other and its relations with the higher system. When we consider sustainability in a supply chain, we consider the terms reuse, remanufacture, recondition, recycle, restore, or reclaim. There are really 5 areas of interest when we are considering supply chain sustainability. SCS means green purchasing, manufacturing and distribution, reverse supply chains and logistics. It means integrating the 3 Ps, people, planet, and profit. It means considering the entire life cycle of a product, including product design, material sourcing, manufacturing, delivery, operations, and disposal point of views. SCS means to do no harm to the environment or social systems, while still making a profit in the long run. It also looks at the effective use of sustainable market frameworks, such as cradle-to-cradle, reverse supply chain and closed loops, or green initiative options that might work in harmony. General Motors was founded in 1908 and today sells its vehicles in around 200 countries with manufacturing operations in more than 30 countries. General Motors, once the world's largest vehicle manufacturer, is currently 12th on the Fortune 500 list. GM's supply chain extends over 20,000 businesses who are spending $100 billion on about 200,000 items, including raw materials, parts, supplies, freight, transportation, and other services, and employs 173,000 people globally, less than any amount since 2010. GM also operates one of the largest and most successful financial service companies, GMAC. GM is widely diversified from auto to a large assortment of other types of engines. After purchasing Winton Motor Carriage Company in 1930, GM marketed extended engine groups which included diesel, locomotive, and aircraft engines in the U.S. GM also has the industry-leading in-vehicle communications and information services, DirecTV, all types of appliances, cell technologies, and others. GM's new personal calling service provides hands-free, voice-activated, in-vehicle cellular phone access. On the downside, GM was by far the largest bailout in 2008. The bankruptcy was mainly due to the banking fiasco, but many feel that mismanagement also played a big part. As a result, CEO Rick Wagner was forced to resign. GM's bankruptcy was one of the biggest Chapter 11 filings in U.S. history. This bankruptcy was the 4th largest in the U.S. territory, following the Lehman Brothers Holdings Inc. was number 1, number 2 Washington Mutual, number 3 WorldComp. GM is looking to the future when it comes to sustainability, with a goal of having 90% of their vehicles electric with zero emission by year 2030. Ford Motor Company began in 1903 when Henry Ford and Associates filed incorporation in Michigan. After that, Ford became the world's largest corporation. The Ford Motor Company is represented in more than 200 nations and territories on 6 continents. Today, Ford Motor Company is the world's largest producer of pickups, being the farm favorite. Ford employs more than 190,000 people, which is about half of its peak in 1997. In 1976, Ford Motor Company decided to go global with its first successful front-wheel drive, the Fiesta. Ford Motor Company is ranked 11 on the Fortune 500 list. Ford is also very diversified and is best known for cars and trucks, but also is involved in industrial engines, glass, plastic, financial services, replacement parts, and electronics. Ford Motor Company's leadership believes that diversity will be the engine that powers the future. Ford did not really need to be bailed out in 2008, as GM did and others. But they did, however, take a much smaller loan of $6 billion in fear that the $36 billion bailout of GM would leave them in the dust. Ford's sustainability approach is all about people. They believe championing human rights and diversity is the answer. However, they're still pursuing alternative energy, and though electric zero-emissions vehicles are part of that, their main efforts are in hybrid gas technologies. Today, Ford and GM still run pretty close in everything. To the left is the global sales report by JATO. Ford is listed at number 3 among auto brands selling 5 million plus vehicles, and GM, listed as Chevrolet here, has almost 4 million. On the right is the 2019 Fortune 500 report. It lists Ford as number 12 and General Motors as 13. Next, let's look at the corporate sustainability and socially responsible initiatives for each General Motors and Ford side by side, just a few of them. General Motors was ranked on the Dow Jones Sustainability Index, the DJSI, for corporate sustainability leadership. For the second year, in fact, GM was listed as an index component. GM is the only automaker on the North American index. The GSI is the leading global benchmark for corporate sustainability, tracking leading sustainability-driven companies based on investment of financial relevant environmental, social, and governance factors. May not be very creative, but this is innovative as they are the only automaker listed. For Ford, in January 2019, Ford received an A grade for its water security efforts from CDP, Global Disclosure Systems. CDP drives sustainable economies by monitoring environmental impact. This is the 4th year Ford has earned an A from CDP for water management. Ford is one of fewer than 30 companies globally to get this award. On the flip side, GM tends to try to sidestep water reclamation through petitions when possible. And again, Ford might not be showing a lot of creativity here, but it is innovative as they're like the only ones to earn a grade of A from CDP. Role of audit in sustainability and social responsibility of companies side by side. There's quite a difference, actually. Disclosure of information is paramount for GM. In addition to publishing the annual report, GM aligns its reporting with several other leading organizations. GM has worked with CDP since 2010 to track carbon emissions, reporting on all 15 categories of Scope 3 emissions while being active with the Climate Change Program. When thinking of the triple bottom line, GM is out in front of Ford. GM is pursuing a goal of 90% zero emissions by the year 2030. This is way advanced when it comes to the planet. GM's move from fossil fuel is next generation thinking. In order to succeed, they'll have to move toward a no waste and 3P solution where audit is a must. Ford, on the other hand, uses a variety to manage sustainability, including Global Reporting Initiative, the GRI, Partnership for a Cleaner Environment, PACE, and third-party firms. Since 2003, Ford has performed 1,163 supplier audits. This is pretty amazing. Ford was one of the first to focus on sustainability to ensure Ford's responsible actions and keep Ford accountable to society. In thinking of the triple bottom line for Ford, they are thinking different approaches. Even when a green building was a great solution, they wouldn't even consider it until it was less than half the cost of a normal building. Ford has mantras like one people, one company, kind of frightening to me. Audits are a part of Ford. However, sometimes they are ignored. On the other hand, there are a lot more audit results available on Ford's webpage than on GM's. The triple bottom line is basically how a firm incorporates the 3 Ps in the supply chain. 3 Ps stand for people, planet, and profit. General Motors is moving towards cradle-to-cradle approach, while also putting most of their work into electric zero-emission vehicles. It is a culture all about planet. While Ford is also doing this to some extent, in comparison to General Motors, Ford's efforts are small. In addition, both companies are pursuing auto drive technology. Ford's is cloud-based, and they have a vision of their autos actually talking to one another, while GM's approach is more autonomous. As far as the planet, GM is the leading of the two. On the other hand, Ford is a culture all about people and profit. Ford is a champion for human rights and diversity in the supply chain, diversity in general, and equality for women. Ford wins for the people category. Revenue is another matter. They are both very close with about $15 billion difference. You can see that in the graphs. Risk. GM takes more risks than Ford. In the past, this obviously did not pay off. GM filed for bankruptcy and Ford did not in 2008. GM's bet on electric vehicles is risky for the future. Also, fighting big oil is not always the wise choice for an automaker. Ford is taking the less risk by promoting people. However, Ford has a history of saying they are for sustainability and then keeping efforts minimal. In the future, Ford is depending on hybrid technology, keeping in play fossil fuels. Here's where the problem is for Ford. Thanks to the communication age, we can see the average miles per gallon around the world. Japan and the EU have already been averaging around 45 miles per gallon since 2010. Notice also that the US is on the bottom, averaging only 20 miles per gallon. From a sustainability standpoint, this is unacceptable. Also, now that the people of the US are paying $4 a gallon for gas, they are quickly realizing that profits are more important to the US automakers than people. This is one reason today Toyota is at the top of the list for auto sales in the US. The American people have been betrayed by US auto manufacturers, who offer the same models all over the world, but change the miles per gallon they get according to which country they're in. Automakers are quickly finding out that this is unacceptable. Here's the projections for the future. Japan is still leading the spot with 50 miles per gallon, but is projected to meet them in 2025. Of course, Shell Oil was able to get over 300 miles per gallon in their tests, but we will still not touch that. Ford, with its sellout to big oil, is focusing on hybrid technology. This may be the factor that causes them to lose here. It depends on how one looks at it. If the people demand the sustainability and environmental conscience that GM feels they will be the clear winner and Ford will lose out. However, if big oil wins out, as they have for the past 50 years, GM could be left in bankruptcy and Ford wins out. Other technologies to improve or replace fossil fuel has also been suppressed. Some of those you might not know about, like the Pogue carburetor, which was able to make a regular car get about 200 miles per gallon, was sidestepped by adding lead and additives to the gasoline. That's why we add them. The gas companies and the auto companies knew that these additives like lead were harmful to people, but they done it anyway in the name of profit. Another technology that has gone by the wayside is called the gasifier. Gasifier technology that used to be available even in Pratt & Whitney catalogs were suppressed. Now, these gasifiers ran engines, a regular combustible engine, off of biomass like wood. And they used to be able to be mounted on cars and tractors and the such. But today, all that information has been suppressed. In such ways, American auto manufacturers betrayed American trust by putting first profit over people. Now, GM is attempting to correct these failures by moving away from fossil fuels into fully electric vehicles with zero emissions. Now let's delve into the Supplier Code of Conduct. One member of GM's senior leadership is the Senior Vice President of Global Purchasing and Supply Chain, the GPSC. This position is considered to be the driver of the company's strategy, responsible for making certain supply chain standards are defined and understood. The GPSC works with suppliers to fast-track innovation, eliminate waste, and deliver superior financial performance while reshaping how the company and its suppliers work together. The GPSC ensures GMs and GM's partners have mutual success and deliver higher value. Priorities for the Code of Conduct include the suppliers accept GM's terms and conditions. GM expects that suppliers certify compliance with laws, expectations for ethical and social and business and environmental practices, and adhere to requirements which clearly state a ban preventing any use of child labor, forced labor, obtrusive treatment of employees, data protection and privacy, wages, hours and conditions of employment, subcontractor selection, anti-discrimination, occupational health and safety, and motor vehicle safety. Ford does not have a supplier code of conduct, but has what they call Next Evolutionary Step, an aligned business framework. This strategic purchasing model began in 2005. Ford sought after long-term agreements with strategic suppliers, increasing openness and dialogue within a partnership attitude. Moving away from non-compliance rules that could mean the end of Ford's orders to non-complying suppliers. ABF agreements establish working boundaries for both Ford and the suppliers in comprehensive business practices designed to increase future collaboration, of which extended sourcing and data transparency is one. The ABF agreement results in Ford's supplier partners taking greater responsibility in ensuring proper working conditions and environmental management systems in their value chain. Suppliers are expected to adopt a working condition code similar to Ford's and proceed to develop training and compliance systems for their supply chains. Communication and training. The GPSC has several forums for formal supplier engagement. First, the General Motors Supplier Business Council consists of 19 global people who have a monthly meeting with General Motors leadership, where dissemination of vision, new procedures, and evaluations can occur. In late 2018, General Motors combined the Supplier Business Council with the Diversity Council to enhance the collective voice and improve efficiency. By striving to have the best trained environmental professionals in the world, General Motors addresses a variety of issues, including, but not limited to, implementation of corrective and preventive actions, effective use of safety data sheets, management of GHGs and regulatory requirements for air, waste, and water. General Motors feels that communication and training begin with management who are the best trained in all areas, such as sustainability, along with those who are adept in communicating. On the other hand, Ford prefers the one-on-one model and provides training within their AFB supplier management framework. Further, Ford provides training through the Special Supplier Web Portal. The Ford Supplier Portal, the FSP, allows Ford to share information and conduct business with its suppliers in a secure web environment. Additionally, Ford sponsors many internships. Ford's work to address human rights extends throughout the supply chain. Ford feels that training on human rights is essential. Ford's approach to training has been developed and launched through the AIAG, which involves an e-learning module and face-to-face workshops. These workshops stress the role of human rights and legal obligations, as well as industry guidelines and international best practices. Participants must verify training is performed. The 6 risk factors compared. We're going to only look at 3. GM. First, financial risk. GM manages financial risk in many ways. First, General Motors is very diversified, though GM's vision for sustainability is not very diversified. It focuses mostly on the electric vehicle. For Ford, financial risk. First, Ford is also very diversified. This is the most prominent feature for managing financial risk for Ford. However, though Ford has electric vehicles in production, Ford's focus is diversity and hybrid technology. The second one we're looking at is environmental risk. General Motors employs an environmental management system that is continually searching for ways to lower environmental impact. Further, they are committed to renewable energy and zero emissions from their vehicles. Their goals of taking care of our planet, waste reduction, water conservation and quality, greenhouse gas emissions and climate change, energy management, renewable energy, improving technologies, environmental stewardship, responsible sourcing, and obeying environmental regulations and policies. For Ford, environmental risk issue-specific strategies include a climate change strategy, sustainable material strategy, renewable energy strategy, human rights strategy, and circular economy strategy. Further, Ford touts the following items listed from the sustainability report. Those items are access, climate change, zero air emissions from facilities, not vehicles, energy using 100% renewable energy sources by 2035, waste, zero waste to landfill with no single-use plastics from operations by 2030. Just a note, General Motors achieved zero waste to landfills in 2017. Further things listed for Ford are water, aspiring to use fresh water for human consumption only, materials, to use recycled and renewable only for their plastics in their cars, and a continued effort to champion human rights and diversity. The third one we're going to be looking at is brand reputation risk. General Motors is the fourth largest automotive provider in the world. There's not too many brands underneath them. Some may feel that it would be impossible to smear the name of Jimmy. One has only to look at such epic fails as the Vega, though, or the Love Truck, to know that customers are fickle. Today, most people drive out of necessity, and most have heard never-ending rumors of the 300-mile-per-gallon cars since the 1960s. Today, as General Motors is at the forefront of the electric car, a sense of appreciation comes over those that understand that our bondage to big oil may soon be over. General Motors is looking at the long-term solution by addressing the use of fossil fuels. Ford, when it comes to brand reputation risk, Ford is the sixth largest automotive provider in the world. Built Ford tough is well known, though the Mustang II was their worst car ever. However, the Pinto outperformed the Chevy Vega, which saved face for Ford. Ford is the go-to truck of choice for the farming community. As such, it is likely Ford will remain a world favorite. Ford looks at long-term solutions by addressing diversity and human rights. Customer-driven requirements. In attempting to articulate the primary strategic differences between Ford and General Motors' customer-driven strategies, one might feel that the Ford strategies serve the customer better when not considering global warming and fossil fuel use. The truth is that Ford is seeking to keep the world bound to fossil fuels. Already, U.S. automakers betray Americans by delivering same model vehicles to U.S. residents that use more fuel than the same models sold in other countries. When one looks at the human rights and diversity efforts of Ford, one gets a sense that these efforts are no less than a smokescreen hiding the truth of minimal efforts for true sustainability. GM, on the other hand, is not clouding the vision, as they go wholeheartedly into electric vehicles, planning to have 90% of what they sell electric by 2030. In the long run, this better serves people. Human rights and diversity are useless in an Earth that does not support life properly. Further, the move from fossil fuels brightens the future of humanity, one where people are not slaves to economics. in socially responsible best practices in terms of the whole supply chain. Currently, the two break even. Ford, with its awards for water conservation, renewable energy, zero use of one-time plastics, and using only recycled plastics for production, is about even with GM's zero landfill, owned garbage recycling centers, renewable energy, and zero emission vehicle goals. Next up, hazardous waste and documentation. Ford's approach to hazmat is to have extensive use of safety data sheets which log the management of GHGs and regulatory requirements for air, waste, and water. This is just one way that Ford tracks and documents all regulated materials. This tracking of regulated materials from cradle to grave allows Ford to regulate hazmat waste concerning conflict materials, such things as hexchrome, lead, mercury, copper, from its source to its end of life. As of December 31st, 2017, approximately 50% of General Motors' industrial operations were landfill-free, in addition to the 63 of the non-manufacturing operations. General Motors' composting program is the most successful example of circular economy. These efforts are minimizing environmental impact, generating revenue from the sales of byproducts, limiting raw materials through the use of recycling, cutting the carbon footprint, and lowering financial liabilities associated with waste disposal. Further, other major companies, along with GM, have all generated sustainability reports to track progress. Further, they have been ranked by a number of indices, such as the Dow Jones Sustainability Index and Newsweek Green Score, in addition to the use of safety data sheets which log the management of GHGs and regulatory requirements for air, waste, and water. Same ones that Ford uses. From cradle to grave and beyond, GM is forging forward in the cradle to grave with reverse supply chain management in mind. First, efforts to use recycling by hosting their own GM auto recycling centers to reclaim metals, plastic, glass, and other useful items. Metals are melted and recast, plastics are recycled to pellets or turned back into oils through heat exchangers, and tires are ground for use in highways. In addition, landfills are being phased out with the goal of a full cradle-to-cradle process. Indeed, GM's approach to waste management and viewing waste as a resource out of place has shown promise. This approach minimizes risk while making revenue from what other firms consider waste. Further, in the long run, this may put GM in front of other automakers by building to the future instead of for the dollar. Cradle to cradle and beyond for Ford, well, Ford kind of tinkers with cradle to cradle and reverse supply chain management. First, William McDonough signed a contract in 1999 with an automaker to redesign the River Road complex in Michigan with a living green roof. This was met by some reluctance at first until the EPA developing new stormwater regulations, which would have cost Ford $50 million, came about. McDonough's natural stormwater management system cost only $15 million. As a result, Ford installed the first living green roof. More recently, Ford was noticed once more when it unveiled its Model U concept car, a vehicle powered by a hydrogen engine and including Milliken & Company's upholstery fabric chosen for the environmental health assets and capable of perpetuating recycling. Ford is way behind GM when it comes to zero landfill, as it was ZWTL goal, something that GM achieved 50% of in 2017. In conclusion, this presentation covers just a few of the details concerning Ford and General Motors' supply chain sustainability. To recap, supply chain sustainability means green purchasing, manufacturing, distribution, reverse supply chains, and logistics, integrating the 3 Ps, people, planet, profit, considering the entire life cycle of a product, including all of the points of view. SCS means to do no harm to the environmental or social systems, while still making profit in the long run. And finally, the effective use of sustainable market frameworks such as cradle-to-cradle, reverse supply chain, and closed loop or green innovative options that work in harmony. General Motors and Ford are working toward green manufacturing and low-emission logistics. When looking at the three Ps, Ford is more about people and General Motors is more about the planet. With hazardous waste, Ford comes out in front with their source tracking of conflict materials. Both get a current grade of D when it comes to environmental systems like water reclamation, although Ford did get an award. For social, Ford wins out as it puts emphasis on diversity and human rights. General Motors is far above Ford in cradle to cradle with its own dismantlers and reclamation centers, while Ford attempts with their Go Green initiative but fails completely. However, Ford does forge new territory with its 100% goal of using recycled plastic in the production of automobiles. So, which organization manages its supply chain in a more sustainable and socially responsible way? Well, both are not doing well. For some of the largest firms in the world, it is amazing that value to stakeholders is not more important. Historically, both companies have betrayed its stakeholders by reducing so greatly the miles per gallon of its vehicles. To compound this is the compliance to put additives such as lead into white gas to preclude such advancements as the Pogue carburetor, which was patented in 1934 and made vehicles get well over 100 miles a gallon. By putting the lead in the fuel, it would clog up the system and it could no longer work. Even though the lead and the additives were harmful to people, they still did it. Other things that were suppressed were technologies like the gasifier, which uses bio-waste like wood to power vehicles instead of gasoline. GM is on track to correct this by going all electric, while Ford is not, while staying with the fossil fuel plan. And finally, which organization engages risk in a more proactive, sustainable, and socially responsible manner? General Motors is taking the riskier road. Ford is playing it safe and is business as usual. GM is moving away from fossil fuels, being the first major automaker to have a goal of 90% electric vehicles. Besides automakers like Tesla. Tesla and other fully electric firms with the welfare of mankind are excluded in the term major automakers here, as only the top few are taken into consideration. As further goals progress, it is foreseen that General Motors will adopt such things as 100% recycled plastic in productions as Ford has. Lastly, though Ford's focus is on diversity and human rights, General Motors has these same items also, but is not using their efforts to shadow truth. That's it. Thank you for viewing this presentation. Have a good day.
Faster than